What if everything we thought we knew about Taylor Swift and Blake Lively was only the surface of a much deeper storm, hidden in cryptic lyrics, secret text messages, and silent betrayals? Tonight, we unravel the shocking clues that could change everything about Hollywood's most glittering friendship. The story of Taylor Swift and Blake Lively has long been painted as one of the most enviable friendships in Hollywood. Two powerhouse women linked together by moments of joy, laughter, vacations, and public celebrations. But what if beneath the polished perfection, there has been a storm brewing, one that is only now being uncovered through subtle signs, cryptic lyrics, hidden Easter eggs, body language shifts, and even whispers of legal entanglements that threaten to expose the truth about what really went on behind the scenes? Because when two of the most carefully curated public figures in the entertainment world start showing cracks in their glossy image, fans do not just notice, they obsess. They dissect and they connect dots in ways that reveal a picture far darker than anyone could have imagined. It begins with the public image that Taylor and Blake projected at the height of their bond, one that seemed unshakable from heartfelt Instagram tributes to carefully choreographed appearances on red carpets, and in private moments shared with the world, the two seemed to embody friendship goals. Taylor even included Blake's children's names in her music, something that felt deeply symbolic of the trust and closeness they shared. But Hollywood has taught us time and again that what glitters is not always gold. And soon the silences became louder than the tributes when Blake gave birth to her third child in 2019. Taylor, who had once been known to flood her friends with love and public recognition, was suddenly silent. No Instagram post, no heartfelt caption, no cake baked and shared in a charming photograph. This silence stood in stark contrast to her celebrations of others, and fans immediately began speculating that something was wrong. And when silence replaces celebration in the world of celebrity culture, especially when it comes to Taylor Swift, a master of hidden clues, people take notice. They began revisiting moments from the past, reading deeper into gestures, posts, and lyrics, trying to piece together when exactly the shift occurred. Some fans pointed back to earlier years when Taylor's 4th of July parties, which had once prominently featured Blake, suddenly stopped. Including her others, noted the carefully polite yet distant tone when Taylor spoke about Blake directing her music video, "I Bet You Think About Me," a collaboration that seemed celebratory but which ended without any follow-up. Despite Taylor's pattern of returning to trusted collaborators again and again, why was there no continuation? Why did this creative connection vanish as quickly as it appeared? The intrigue only deepened when rumors swirled that Blake had asked Taylor to delete text messages that may have been tied to the legal battles involving Justin Baldoni, and claims made about behavior on the set of It Ends With Us. If true, such a request would not only raise questions about loyalty but could also have legal consequences. Destroying evidence or attempting to hide communications in the face of potential litigation is a serious matter. And if Taylor truly turned over those texts to Baldoni's team in exchange for avoiding deposition, the implications are staggering, because that would mean Taylor was not only distancing herself from Blake, but actively cooperating with the opposing side in a way that could devastate Blake's credibility and shift the course of the entire case. Whispers emerged that it was Taylor's own father who provided information to Bryan Freedman, suggesting that Blake had pressured Taylor to delete evidence. If that is true, then the silence from Taylor's camp is not just about friendship. It is about strategy, about self-preservation, about cutting ties when the risk outweighs the reward. And for someone as meticulous as Taylor Swift, who has spent her entire career weaving her life into art while maintaining ironclad control over her image, such a move would be deliberate, calculated, and devastating. For Blake, fans have long said that Taylor tells her story in layers, through lyrics, Easter eggs, and collaborations. And when they revisited her songs during the Folklore and Evermore eras, some lines suddenly seemed to carry heavier weight. Tracks like Madwoman and Tolerate it were interpreted by many as reflections on betrayal, lopsided loyalty, and the exhaustion of giving endlessly to someone who only takes these interpretations. May not be conclusive, but when paired with the public distance between Taylor and Blake, they start to look less like coincidence and more like confession. Taylor's genius has always been in her ability to craft music that feels universal, while also functioning as a diary she chooses to share, and her fans, trained to decode every word, every metaphor, and every image, are relentless in drawing connections. Some saw the silence after Blake's milestones, the absence from key events, and the distant body language at public appearances as further evidence that something fundamental had shifted between them. Body language experts noted that at later events, Blake angled away from Taylor while Taylor's arms crossed defensively, small gestures perhaps, but significant when compared to their earlier years of open laughter, shared inside jokes, and effortless closeness. Even on Instagram, which Taylor uses as a coded canvas for her storytelling, the absence of Blake became noticeable, and the presence of other friends like Selena Gomez became amplified. It was not just about who was included, but who was excluded, and in Hollywood, exclusion often tells the loudest story when People magazine and other outlets began reporting that Blake's legal team had overreached, even attempting to pull Taylor into depositions only for her side to hand over evidence. Instead, it became clear that the narrative was spiraling away from Blake and toward something more damaging in the court of public opinion, because Taylor's silence was not denial, it was strategy. A silence that fans understood as louder than any statement. A silence that suggested she had given all she needed to behind closed doors, and that Blake was now standing, alone against a storm she had set in motion with her own decisions, whether through the dragon text messages that framed Taylor as a weapon to be wielded, or the attempts to control what evidence was seen. The impression left behind is one of betrayal, not just personal, but professional, and in a world where reputation is everything, that betrayal may prove irreparable. Taylor, meanwhile, continues to control her story through her art, her social media, and her silence, leaving fans to do what they do best: to code, speculate, and connect the dots to uncover a hidden brilliance that may have been in plain sight all along. The Hollywood machine thrives on secrets, and those secrets always find a way to crawl out into the open when the timing is most inconvenient. And in the case of Blake Lively and her escalating war with Justin Baldoni, it feels like the walls are closing in faster than she can spin the story, because the texts that were never supposed to see daylight are now at the center of a storm. And these are not just casual exchanges. These are the kind of raw, behind-the-curtain confessions that rip away the glossy image and expose the raw nerves beneath it. The truth is, Taylor Swift was never supposed to be dragged into this mess. But now she is. And Hollywood insiders whisper that her private words, her moments of vulnerability, and her take on the feud could become ammunition in a courtroom that is already dripping with tension and betrayal. The impact of this cannot be overstated, because once a judge decides those messages are relevant, there is no turning back. No publicist, no crisis manager, and no carefully crafted Instagram post can undo the ripple effect once they hit the record. And that is why the backlash against Blake is so fierce. Because many in the industry see this as self-inflicted damage, a drama that could have been contained but instead was escalated to nuclear levels. And when you bring someone like Taylor into the firestorm, you automatically trigger the wrath of her fiercely loyal fan base, the Swifties who do not forget and do not forgive. And suddenly, the narrative shifts from Blake versus Justin to Blake versus an army of millions who control the online discourse and the headlines that shape perception. Now consider the legal stakes. Justin Baldoni has positioned himself as the calm patient strategist, letting the documents and the facts speak for themselves, while Blake is painted as increasingly erratic, desperate to regain control but losing ground with every filing and every leak. And the judge in this case has already signaled that transparency will outweigh celebrity privilege, which means those texts are not going to be locked away forever. They are coming, and when they do, the fallout will not only scorch Blake, but also test the limits of friendship and loyalty in an industry where alliances are everything. Because if it turns out that Blake tried to weaponize private conversations or misrepresented what was said, the trust between her and Taylor will be shattered, and that rupture will echo through every red carpet event, every industry dinner, and every brand partnership tied to their image. This is why commentators are calling it mutually assured destruction, because in her quest to destroy Baldoni, Blake might have pulled the pin on her own career. Grenade and Hollywood is watching in stunned fascination, because the lesson here is not just about law, it is about power, about how fast the public can turn, and about how fragile reputations really are when they rest on curated illusions already. Journalists are digging deeper, not just into the text, but into Blake's entire history of power plays behind the scenes. Colleagues who once stayed silent are whispering that this is not the first time she has bulldozed allies to protect her own position. And when those stories begin to stack up, the image of America's sweetheart collapses into something far more complicated, something that does not sell movie tickets or luxury endorsements. So the industry begins to distance itself subtly. At first with fewer invitations, fewer calls returned, and then aggressively as the scandal deepens, because no one wants to be collateral damage in a war they did not start. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni, though battered by months of allegations, begins to look like the survivor. The one who took the punches, kept his head down, and trusted the process. And that narrative shift is deadly for Blake, because once the tide of public opinion turns, it rarely swings back, no matter how many glossy magazine covers or talk show appearances she arranges. This is the moment where the court of law intersects with the court of public opinion, and in both arenas, she appears to be losing worse each day. And what makes it even more dramatic is the looming possibility that Taylor Swift herself could be forced into the spotlight, not as a pop icon, but as a reluctant witness pulled into the vortex of litigation against her will. And if that happens, the explosion will make everything that has come before look like a minor skirmish, because we are talking about the most powerful woman in music. The person whose words move stock prices and shift entire cultural conversations, suddenly dragged into a legal quagmire because of someone else's choices and betrayal. Imagine the optics of that, the headlines, the frenzy, the social media meltdown. It would be catastrophic for Blake and her camp, because it would not just be about one legal battle. It would be about violating the unwritten code of Hollywood: friendship, trust, and discretion. And once you break that code, you rarely recover. So yes, the legal filings, the courtroom maneuvers, the technical arguments, they matter. But the real story here is trust shattered, alliances burned, and reputations dangling over the edge of oblivion. And that is why this saga is not just another celebrity feud. It is a cultural earthquake, one that exposes the fragility of image, the brutality of ambition, and the inevitability of truth breaking free. The story only grows darker and heavier with each passing day because the walls are closing in on everyone involved, and the weight of exposure is beginning to crush even the most carefully crafted facades. Blake Lively thought she had control, thought she had the right friends, the right lawyers, the right media outlets in her corner. But what she never accounted for was the power of truth. Once it begins to leak in whispers, once it begins to travel through hidden texts, through unnamed insiders, through quiet tip-offs, to journalists who are tired of being manipulated by the same celebrity machinery. And now what was once manageable is spiraling into something far larger than she or Ryan Reynolds or any PR team could ever contain. Because when the public senses deception, when fans realize they have been misled, when Hollywood insiders start distancing themselves to protect their own reputations, the domino effect is unstoppable. And right now, those dominoes are crashing down. With ruthless force, the headlines are becoming more savage each day. The tone shifting from mild curiosity to outright condemnation. Magazines that once placed Blake on the cover with glowing praise now sharpen their knives because betrayal makes for better copy than admiration, and betrayal is the word on everyone's lips. Betrayal of co-stars, betrayal of friends, betrayal of audiences who supported her for years, only to feel duped once the stories came out. And at the center of it all is Justin Baldoni, a man who many assumed would be buried under the weight of her accusations. Yet somehow he is the one emerging vindicated. Not because he is perfect, not because he has no flaws, but because every piece of evidence, every leak, every stray message that slips through the cracks shows that Blake may have exaggerated, bent, twisted events until they suited her narrative, and the courts are no longer playing along. The judge who once entertained her filings now questions the very foundation of her claims, asking for proof she does not have, demanding evidence she cannot provide. And in that silence, in that failure to produce something concrete, her credibility crumbles further than any rumor ever could. Meanwhile, the whispers about Taylor Swift remain loud, because those texts, those communications that Blake never wanted revealed, carry a weight beyond friendship. They hint at strategy, at manipulation, at backroom conversations about how to control perception, how to spin the story, how to keep Hollywood aligned in her favor. But once the judge suggested those messages may in fact be relevant, once the possibility of their release became real, a chill swept through her camp, because nothing frightens a celebrity more than private words being exposed in public court filings. No amount of curated Instagram posts can erase the sting of raw, unfiltered truth. And that is why panic has begun to set in. Not just for Blake, but for Ryan too, because his reputation is tied to hers, and the more she falls, the more he is dragged down alongside her. And Hollywood is merciless in this regard. Once the scent of blood is in the air, agents, producers, fellow actors begin to distance themselves. No one wants to be seen defending a potential liar. No one wants to go down in flames just to protect a friend whose star is flickering out, so the distancing begins subtle at first. A missed call here, an absent invitation there, but soon it grows more obvious. Projects, Suddenly stalled partnerships quietly dissolved friendships once loud on social media, now eerily silent, and fans are noticing they track every move, they compare past loyalty with current absence. They catalog every shift and draw their own conclusions. And the conclusion they are reaching is devastating. Blake Lively may no longer be the beloved figure she once was. Instead, she is becoming a case study in how quickly a Hollywood career can disintegrate when truth is weaponized and perception shifts yet. Even as she tries to fight back, as her lawyers file motions, as her team leaks counter-narratives to gossip outlets, it all feels hollow because the internet remembers the contradictions, the timelines that never matched up the words. She herself said in past interviews that now seem to undermine her present stance, and once the internet seizes on a weakness, it never lets go. Memes are spreading, jokes are circulating, clips are resurfacing, and the image she fought to maintain, as untouchable, perfect, graceful, now seems laughable to the very audience that once adored her. The backlash is not contained to fans either, because industry players are starting to side with Baldoni in quiet but meaningful ways. He is being invited to panels, given sympathetic profiles in major outlets, hailed as a man who stood up against a powerful system determined to silence him. And though he may not be innocent in every respect, he is smart enough to know that perception matters more than facts in Hollywood, and right now, perception is swinging firmly in his favor every day. Blake fails to produce real evidence, strengthens his case, every attempt by her team to smear him only rebounds, making her look desperate, making him look like the underdog unfairly targeted by a vindictive co-star. And Hollywood loves an underdog. It always has. The press too thrives on this narrative of reversal, the mighty falling, the underestimated rising again. It is why this story refuses to die, why it consumes the entertainment news cycle day after day with fresh angles, fresh leaks, fresh outrage, and behind it all, the audience eats it up, because nothing entertains the public more than the sight of a star unraveling in real time. Yet the question remains, how much further can it go? How much lower can Blake sink before she either concedes or self-destructs? Because right now, her silence is deafening. On some days, she lashes out subtly through representatives or vague social posts. But on most days, she says nothing, letting the speculation fester, letting others control the narrative. And that is the worst mistake any celebrity can make when under fire. Because if you are not telling your story, someone else will, and they will. Tell it in ways you cannot control. That is exactly what is happening here. And it is why her empire is cracking at the edges. Endorsements that once lined up eagerly now hesitate. Brands do not want association with controversy. They want safe, reliable faces who do not risk alienating consumers. And right now, Blake Lively does not fit that description at all. The financial impact of this backlash will be staggering if it continues, but even more devastating is the personal impact. The betrayal of friendships, the destruction of trust, the endless questions about authenticity. Once the audience doubts you, once they think you are not real, no performance, no interview, no project can ever fully win them back. And that is the nightmare unfolding before us with every court date, with every leaked text, with every damning headline. The nightmare grows deeper and darker. And though some may think she can recover, that Hollywood is forgiving, that reinvention is always possible, the truth is this: scandal has already rewritten her legacy, whether she admits it or not. Because for years to come, people will not think first of her films or her roles. They will think of this messy legal battle, of these whispered texts of the time her empire collapsed under the weight of truth and perception. And that may be the most brutal consequence of all, because reputations once shattered are almost impossible to restore. And as the court prepares for its next chapter, as Justin Baldoni gains more ground, as the public waits breathlessly for the potential unsealing of those Taylor Swift messages, we stand at the precipice of something unprecedented. Hollywood has seen scandals before, but rarely has it seen such a perfect storm of betrayal, exposure, and collapse. And the question now is not whether Blake Lively can survive this, but whether she even wants to continue fighting when every move only seems to make things worse, when every attempt at defense only deepens the damage, because at some point even the most determined star realizes the battle is already lost at the end of the day. This entire saga has evolved into something far larger than a celebrity spat or a one-off legal battle. What began as an argument over reputation and defamation has now spiraled into a full-blown cultural storm, where Hollywood's carefully polished veneers are being peeled back in real time. Blake Lively's image, once unshakable, has been rattled by testimony, leaks, and the refusal of the court to shield her from scrutiny. Justin Baldoni, a man initially painted as an underdog, is now gaining traction not only in the legal arena, but also in the court of public opinion, where whispers of vindication are growing louder with every headline. And hovering over all of it is the presence of Taylor Swift, whose name, messages, and influence seem to hold the key to a vault that could blow this case wide open. The press. The fans and the industry itself are not merely spectators, they are participants. Every leaked text, every deposition, every media spin adds fuel to the fire, making this one of the most dissected celebrity legal feuds in recent history. It's no longer about who wins or loses in court. It's about who survives with their legacy intact and who crumbles under the weight of exposure. Hollywood thrives on reinvention, but not everyone gets the luxury of a comeback. For some, this storm will reshape careers, friendships, and alliances permanently. For others, it may mark the beginning of the end. As this case barrels forward, one truth stands above all. The reckoning is here, and no amount of PR, power, or influence can fully stop the tidal wave that has already been set in motion.